Shalom, everyone. Today is HaAtzmaut, Israel Independence Day. This Independence Day is quite different than previous ones. As everyone knows, we are under the clouds of wartime. But nonetheless, it is a day to acknowledge that we do have a homeland. Almost the majority of Jews in the world are living once again in the Holy Land. Israel is a dynamic, growing, creative society, and there's much to be grateful for. Just yesterday, we observed Memorial Day, and as we all know, a very, very high price has been paid for us to have the merit to be here in Israel today. Over the years, many commentators and historians have shown that there's a very great connection or similarity between the time of Hanukkah, the Hashmonaim and the Maccabees, and our time today, especially going back to pre-state days in the 1940s. At the time of Hanukkah, the Greek Empire, Alexander the Great, had spread and created the largest empire the world had ever known. By the time of Hanukkah, the Greek Empire had split into three divisions, but nonetheless, tiny Judea against the Syrian Greeks was like almost impossible odds. Like we say in the silent prayer, the Amidah, a special prayer for Hanukkah, the weak against the mighty, the few against the strong. That God delivered us out of their hands. So we then, even now, we're just a tiny dot on the map. Then Judea was even smaller. And the military odds were astronomical. But if we look at the 1940s, you see a very, very similar idea. The Jewish people wanted to establish a state in Israel. And at that time, we were pitted against the British Empire. This is at a time where they used to say the sun never sets on the British Empire. Britain ruled almost all of the continents. They had a hold in all of the continents. At the same time, we were pitted against the Nazi regime in Europe, and it even had spread into northern Africa. It was on its way to Israel. And we were pitted against the entire Arab world and the entire Muslim world. And at the time, there were approximately maybe 500,000 Jews in Israel by the middle of the 1940s. And so this was even more formidable than what the Maccabees faced. So there's a question that's asked, after the Maccabees succeeded, at least to take back Jerusalem. Many people don't know that when we rededicated the temple at the time of Hanukkah, that was only in the third year of a 25-year war. We had taken over the temple, but we had not expelled the Greeks, and we had not reestablished total Jewish sovereignty here. But we had retaken the temple, and as we learn from tradition, they cleaned the temple, which had been defiled, and they could not find enough oil for lighting the menorah. They wanted to restart the service in the temple. And they found then one cruse of oil with the seal of the Kohen Gadol. And they lit it, and a miracle occurred, and the oil, enough for one day, lasted for 8 days until they could make new oil that would be pure for lighting the menorah. So the question is asked, why didn't they just wait 1 week? What, in a certain way, what was the hurry? Of course, they were excited. They had recaptured the temple and they had cleaned it. But they could have waited a week, gotten enough oil, and lit the menorah and start the service again. But instead, they took this one cruse of oil and they didn't know what would happen the next day. Theoretically, there would have been enough oil for 1 day, and then they would have to start all over again. And the answer is that sometimes in our private lives, the life of a country, that a certain opportunity affords itself. And either we can push the door open, or we can debate it and wait. Sometimes the best strategy is not to rush through, to think it over, to plan, to make a strategy. And other times, when the opportunity arises, grab it. It's one of the secrets of life on an individual level and a national level. Obviously, the Maccabees felt that God had opened a door after years and years of oppression. And now with the temple purified, they weren't thinking about, okay, in another day or 2 or 3, we'll make new oil. Right now, the gate is open to relight the menorah. So in our time, we have a similar idea. Here it was the middle 40s, as I said, we're pitted against virtually the entire world. And then after the Holocaust, after the horrors of the Holocaust became known, there was a moment of world sympathy, and the United Nations voted the partition plan. That which would be given to Israel was almost a tiny sliver of what Israel is today. Nonetheless, Israel accepted it. The Arabs did not accept it. And the vote was in November, but the British were still here and they weren't going to leave until May. And so during those months, the situation was totally out of hand here. And people everywhere began to question, is this going to work? This partition plan does not seem like it's going to work. And everyone was getting cold feet. Even some of the Jewish leadership was like, what's going to be here? What's going to be the day after we declare our independence? We're going to end up going to war with the entire Arab and Muslim world. And at that moment, very similar to the logic of lighting the menorah, really one person, not alone, but it was on the strength of David Ben-Gurion's conviction, is the gate is open now. We don't know if it will be open ever again. We must declare independence and go forward, even though we don't know what will happen and how the cards are going to fall here. But right now, the gate is open. We need to walk through. And so on the 5th of Iyar, 1948, in the Jewish calendar 5708, Israel declared its independence. And sure enough, the next day, 5 Arab states declared war, and we found ourselves in the War of Independence. But the 5th of Iyar is like lighting the menorah. After 2,000 years, we could see the light at the end of the tunnel. And that is what we're celebrating every year. We have our homeland back. There's an opportunity for every Jew in the world to come. Israel is a dynamic, growing society, as I said in the beginning. And there's no end to the advancements that are happening here. and to what we can contribute to the world. Right now, we're in a war situation, but we will make it through. Don't know how, we don't know when. But Israel is here to stay. There's no power on earth that is going to move us out of here. And Bezrat Hashem, with God's help, we will be celebrating many, many more Independence Days, Yom HaAtzmaut, not under the shadow of the war, but instead with peace with all of our neighbors, and it will happen. Of this we should have absolute faith. It will happen. So Yom HaAtzmaut Sameach to everyone.